Howdy friends, and welcome back to the channel. I had a local customer who wanted me to make some comfrey oil for her, and I'm going to take you along for the journey. So even though I don't make products to sell online anymore, one of my longtime customers was like, could you please make some comfrey oil? Her and her family absolutely love it. They use it all the time. And I was like, I can totally do that for you. This used to be a product that I would make and sell. It's a big truck coming by. So loud. Anywho, I thought I would take you along for the journey because I'm going to be using like a quicker method. And this is also one of those infused oils that we can make in the fall, especially if you've done what I've done with my comfrey. But first, let's talk about why you care. One of comfrey's common names is knit bone, and it's an amazing anti-inflammatory. It helps with sore muscles. It's a specific actually for broken bones, torn ligaments, pulled tendons, and can help, help heal tissues very, very quickly. And so while it's not always my go-to for just sore muscles, it can absolutely be used for that. And like I said, a powerful anti-inflammatory. So when infused into oil, it can be really good for people who have chronic aches and pains, who have any injuries, who are prone to injuries, all of these kinds of things. So I'm going to turn the camera around and show you my comfrey and talk to you a little bit about why I'm able to make this late September. All right, this is one of many comfrey plants that I have on the property. This one has been completely mowed down twice, which is why I have so many leaves in such great shape that I'm able to make some comfrey oil this late in the season. Comfrey can get rather large and can get a little bit out of control. And so like I said, we'll just like hack it right back. Friends, it can handle it. Trust me. Comfrey can go in pretty much any areas. It does seem to like full sun and well draining soil. But like I said, we have some growing on the property that just naturalized in other areas in full shade, and it's doing quite well. It's actually pretty hard to kill. This one I dug up. I actually wanted mugwort here, and I thought I got the entire root structure. I actually gave chunks of the root to students, and I was like, here, plant this on your property. And clearly that didn't work. It just keeps coming back. So it's one of those plants that will, like, you can't kill it, and you can have a later season harvest if you completely mow it back. Now yours might still look like this too, which is really kind of cool. Another thing that I actually have videos on this, so I'll make sure I link them, but it's a really good plant to use for mulch and really good for making like your own compost tea. And so that is something else you can consider, like if you're a homesteader or a gardener and you want to have some natural fertilizer options, comfrey's a great plant for that as well. It's really, really high in minerals. I know some people take it internally and use it for like nourishing herbal infusions. I personally don't, just because I'm a little nervous about some of the effect it has on the liver. Everybody, to each their own, you know, you do you. But again, a lot of those minerals, those compounds are going to infuse into this oil, which is why it's good for sore muscles, achy joints, injuries, all that kind of stuff. So what I'm going to do, I'll try my best. I'm on my own. I'll see if I can set up the camera and show you, but I'm basically just going to harvest a whole bunch of leaves. For me, this is a 2-day process at least. So this is part one, and then I'm going to show you the rest of the process afterwards. All right, I just could not get my camera to cooperate. But here's a closer look at comfrey. The leaves are actually quite fuzzy. And so while this is also a very common plant, and I've shared lots of information about doing poultices, so let's say you've dislocated a joint or broken a bone after it's been set properly, friends. Not to mention, we're just having a convo. This is not medical advice. Long-term use of this topically in a poultice could cause some irritation. Let's see if I can get close and you can kind of see. There, look at those cool little hairs. Yeah, super awesome. But something else I want to show you, and I hope I can get it on camera, is just how juicy this plant is. And there's a reason why that's important. So I'm going to get to harvesting, and then I'm going to show you a really important step you have to do before you make your fresh Comfrey Herbal Infused oil. All right, I've got all of my Comfrey harvested and I am in my garage. The reason I'm in here is because, as I showed you before, the Comfrey had a lot. Remember when I squished the stalk and all that moisture came out? That's a really important thing to pay attention to, because moisture plus herbs equals rancidity or a moldy end product. Fun fact, until the outside of my house got sprayed directly by a skunk, I used to think rancid comfrey oil was the worst smell I'd ever smelled. Now it's the second worst smell I've ever smelled. But this is one of the only plants that I do this with. I'm going to let it wilt. So I'll turn the camera on and show you the setup. You just have to promise not to judge my garage. Because... Friends, we all have a spot in our house, right, where we probably wouldn't take guests or turn a camera on in. Well, I don't have a garage, so all of our crap ends up out here. Any hoozles. I'll show you the setup I've got. I'm going to let this Comfrey wilt for the rest of the afternoon and wilt overnight. This is going to help. Some of the moisture is going to evaporate from it. I turned it off for filming purposes, but we also have a dehumidifier out here, because the garage tends to flood and have issues with water. The dehumidifier has made a huge difference. But that's going to help speed up that process as well. So now, tomorrow morning, when I make the herbal infused oil and show you what I'm doing from there on in, I'm going to have a wilted product. It's not completely dried, but some of the moisture will be gone. Now, if you want to use dried. Okay, let's not create barriers to herbal medicine. One of the things that I'm really trying to help people with is all this self-sabotage and negative talk we have about, I don't know enough, I can't do this, I don't have the right stuff, blah, blah, blah. Okay, buy dried Comfrey. If that's what you have access to, use it. I prefer using fresh, but there is a learning curve to using fresh herbs. Anywho, I'll show you the setup I've got. Okay, so I have just like a laundry drying rack, and I have my Comfrey leaves hanging out on here. And like I said, they're going to stay out here for the rest of the afternoon and overnight. And then tomorrow morning, I'll turn the camera back on and show you the rest of the process on how to make a quick Comfrey infused oil. Okay, so it's actually 2 days later. I meant to film this yesterday, and we just had a really busy homeschool day. And if you're interested in homeschool stuff, I actually just posted a video of our grade 7 curriculum. But as you can see, well, I don't know if you can, but there's still quite a bit of moisture left in these leaves. So one of the things I'm going to do, can you zoom in, babe? Is the stalk of the plant is where most of the moisture is. So I'm going to take a pair of scissors. Let's clear out of the way here so you guys can see what I'm doing. And I'm just going to cut along this, and I'm going to discard it. This extra step is going to help ensure that you're not going to have as much moisture when you're making your Comfrey infused oil. So it is a little bit of a tedious step. You can try ripping it. It might be a bit faster. There's still a decent amount of moisture in these leaves, because I do want to make a fresh infused oil ideally. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get to work, and I'm going to start cutting out this part, and I'm just going to compost and get rid of, and I'm going to use the outside leaf part, and I'll show you what I'll do next after I get all that work done. Okay, so I have all of my Comfrey despined. The next step is I'm going to chop my herbs with my mezzaluna. If you don't have one of these, you totally need one. I have a link below to one that is very similar to mine. I've had a couple people ask me why I don't link mine, because I bought it at a little kitchen store in downtown Markham Village, I think, like 18 years ago. And so if I had to buy another one, this is the one that I would buy. So that's the link below. Now I'm going to be making a fairly large quantity of this. I'm going to be making a liter, which I think is a quart size jar for my American friends. This is going to make a lot of oil, but remember, I am selling some of this. So I want you to think about how much you and your family would go through. And then the goal is that once you roughly chop your Comfrey, that you're going to loosely fill your jar. So I'm going to get to chopping. Like I said, all the spines are out, and I'm just going to start. See, this is why you want a mezzaluna, friends, because it makes really short work of chopping herbs. This is great for culinary herbs as well. Like yesterday for dinner, I was able to chop up thyme, oregano, marjoram, rosemary, all fresh from the garden, and it's so fast. Now you're going to hear multiple opinions about whether you should chop your herbs or not. And I want you to know that that's exactly what they are, opinions. You do what feels good to you. I chop herbs because it increases the surface area in which my oil, which is the medium that's going to do the extracting, that's going to pull the medicine from the plant, it's going to come in contact to more surface area because I've chopped it. So that's why I chop my plants. Some people say it's disrespectful to the plants. Other people say that it's not necessary. Like I said, do what feels good and do what feels right to you. Don't let that be a barrier. So I've got about half of mine chopped already. Once I'm done and I have my jar filled, I'll show you the next step of the process. I am going to be using what I call my quick herbal infused oil method. I do have a video on that, which I'll link below, but I'll show it to you in this video as well. So I'm going to be using apricot kernel oil today. I like using apricot kernel oil because it absorbs fairly quickly in the skin. Because I know this is going to be used as an infused oil by my customer, meaning she's not going to be making a salve with it, and she's probably going to be putting it over fairly large surface areas, her and her family. I want this to absorb a little bit faster. If you use something like almond oil or coconut, or not almond, sorry, olive oil or coconut oil, they're a bit heavier and greasier. They tend to take a little longer to penetrate into the skin. The aforementioned almond oil is also a really nice choice. I say work with what's accessible to you, work with what you can find. Apricot kernel oil does tend to be fairly shelf stable as well, and it doesn't really have a scent. So it's not going to like impart its own scent into the product that you're making. From what I understand, this is the oil of choice for massage therapists. So you can experiment with whatever you want, like if tallow, I don't know, work with what you have. So what I'm going to do now, this part's really easy. I'm just going to pour the oil over the herbs. Now, when we're working with fresh herbs and oils, we always have to be worried about water content in our herbal infused oil. So one of the ways that I'm going to mitigate some of the effects of this was by wilting our plants, which I talked to you about earlier. Another way is using a little bit of heat, not high heat, warmth. And so what that does, as the oil warms, some of the water content is going to evaporate off, actually a lot of it. And this method has been really successful for me. It also helps, it's got the added bonus of speeding up your infusion time. So because I don't want my customer to wait too long, and I'm worried because comfrey is a really watery plant, I'm going to be using my Instant Pot. So I'm going to wander on over there and show you how to do this. It's really, really simple. Like I said, I have a video on this already, but once you watch this, you'll have the method down pat. All right, I'm over here by my Instant Pot. You can use a slow cooker to do this, but please make sure that your slow cooker has a warm function. You do not want the water in here to get too hot. That's really, really important, because what we're trying to do here is avoid any bacteria growth, right? Warming it so the water evaporates off, but also trying to avoid rancidity. And when you heat up oils at temperatures that are too high, it's just gonna go rancid. You're gonna have to dump the whole thing out. So while in our brains, we're like, ooh, hotter means faster. Don't do it, friends. Trust me. So you want a warm function for this. So what I've done is I've got some water inside the Instant Pot. Do you mind giving them, showing them? And I've got some dishcloths in here. Now the dishcloths are just so that way when I place my jar in, and I actually want a bit more water in here. Yeah. The dishcloths kind of help to nestle the jar so it won't fall over. It's going to take a bit of tinkering with. I might add 1 or 2 more cloths. I would like the water ideally to come up to about here. And like I said, I'm gonna have it on warm, and I'm gonna keep it like this probably all day, all through the night. And then tomorrow morning, I'll come back to you. We'll show you the color difference, and we'll strain out our oil, and I'll show you what I do after that. Super quick side note that I forgot to mention, you do want to keep the lid off. Now, if you're worried about anything flying in there, you can loosely place a paper towel, wrap it with an elastic, put a cloth over top. something that's not going to prevent the water from evaporating out, right? So if we put our lid on and we warm our oil, then any water that's going to evaporate out from our infused oil won't be able to get out. So I usually just leave it open like this. I've never had anything fall in there, but that's a key point to remember. And I'll see you tomorrow. Okay, so it's been about 24 hours. My oil has been sitting in my Instant Pot for that long on warm. You can already see the color difference. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to strain it. I just use a fine mesh strainer, a large one, and a large measuring cup. So I'm going to pour, and you can already look at the color difference of that oil. So you can tell even after 24 hours, it has infused beautifully. There we go. Now, if I were using dried herbs, I would actually want to try to squeeze as much oil out as possible. One of the drawbacks of using dried herbs is because they're dry, they're going to suck up all that oil very, very quickly. Especially if you use something like lavender, it's kind of like a sponge and it's going to suck all that up. So you're going to want to find a way, use cheesecloth, a potato ricer, whatever you have to try to get as much of that oil out as possible. But because these were wilted, still fresh herbs, I don't want to squeeze out any of the oil from these, because if there's any moisture left in the plant, I'm going to be squeezing that out as well. So instead, what I'm going to do is leave it for a minute or two, just as it drips. And once that's done, I'll show you how I bottle it up, and we'll talk a little bit about the possibility of adding essential oils. Okay, so I've done the main straining of the oil, and if you remember what color the apricot kernel oil was before and you look at it now, you can definitely see that the chemical constituents from the comfrey have infused into this oil. That's why I love leaving it for 24 hours, because it definitely makes a stronger oil. Let's talk a little bit about packaging. I like using these amber glass bottles. The ones that I have are the ones here, if you can zoom in. They're the ones for essential oils. So what I usually tell my customers to do is to pop this part off when they get home, because it's really hard for like an infused oil to drip through that. But what I like is that they don't leak and they're fairly inexpensive. I also prefer darker glass because it's less likely to oxidize, giving your product a longer shelf life, which is important. I also want to talk a little bit about essential oils. That is completely up to you, whether you decide you'd like to add some. So for the purposes of what I'm making, my Comfrey Infused oil does have a few essential oils. I don't like going above a 1% dilution. So for a bottle like this, I'm probably using a total of 15 drops. Total of 3 essential oils. So I'm using black spruce, I'm using pine, and I'm using ginger. And I'm pretty meticulous about the way that I do this. And so I'm counting out individual drops. I know I've got like about 6 drops of pine that I need to add to that. And I only do a very small amount of ginger. I like the ginger because it's warming and it helps the oil to penetrate tissues. And when you have things like muscle pain, 2, 3, 4, and 5. That's it. That's it. So I put my essential oils in first. The next step that I like to do is I like to pour into a measuring cup. That's a little bit easier for me to work with. And I do a second straining with a really super fine mesh strainer. So that way, if there's any bits of herb material that's in there, especially if you use dried herbs, you're going to want to do this step because there's often, like, they tend to be a bit dustier. So it's easier for me to pour into those bottles from this than it is from this. So I'm just going to do a second straining. Look at that color. Oh, it's so magical. And that's about enough for me for this. It's not going to fill all my bottles, but again, I tend to be messy and I'm just erring on the side of caution. Just a second straining. I don't have anywhere to put that. There we go. Paper towel. And from here, you can choose to use a little funnel. Personally, I've always just poured it this way and I'm just really super careful. And you're going to fill your bottle. So your last but very important step is to make sure you label your bottle so you know what's in it.
We always forget this step. Life gets busy. Then you know what happens, friends? You open up your cupboard and you got about 5 different bottles full of things and you don't know what they are. So make sure you take the time to label this. If you added essential oils, make sure you include those as well, especially if you want to gift it to anyone. That way, people are curious. They want to know what's in there. I also suggest putting the date so that way you know how old your oil is. I like to use them up within a year. So that gives you an idea of how much you want to produce for yourself. But yeah, slap a label on it and you're done. So thank you so much for joining me and making some Comfrey Infused oil. If you followed this video's instructions and you made some oil, I want to hear about it. Drop it in the comments below. If you've got questions, concerns, or anything you want to pick my brain about, you know what to do. Put your comments below. And until next time, this is Corinne from Spiraea Herbs, wishing you health and wellness.